The rain fell steadily over London, turning the cobblestone streets into slick mirrors that reflected the amber glow of streetlights. Clara Morrison stood at the entrance of her small law office in Clerkenwell, staring at the headline on her phone screen. Duke of Ashford missing, no leads after 48 hours. Her breath caught in her throat. The Duke wasn't just another aristocrat whose name appeared in society pages. He was the man who had defended her father's reputation years ago when no one else would. She scrolled through the article, noting the sparse details. Edward Ashford, 52, had last been seen leaving his Mayfair residence on Monday evening. His staff reported nothing unusual, no signs of struggle, no ransom demands. Just an empty study and an abandoned Jaguar parked 3 blocks from his home. The Metropolitan Police were investigating, but their statements were vague, carefully worded to avoid speculation. Clara's mind raced through possibilities. Edward wasn't the type to vanish without purpose. She had met him twice at charity galas, and both times he struck her as methodical, composed, someone who measured every word and action. His disappearance felt deliberate, but whether by his own hand or someone else's remained unclear. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "If you care about the truth, meet me at Smithfield Market tomorrow, 6 a.m. Come alone." Clara's pulse quickened. She knew she should contact the police, show them the message, but something held her back. The Duke had helped her family when they were desperate. Now it was her turn. The office felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in with the weight of the decision ahead. She glanced at the framed photo on her desk. Her father shaking hands with Edward at a parliamentary event. That handshake had changed everything for her family. It had restored her father's career after a scandal nearly destroyed him. Clara owed Edward more than she could ever repay. She grabbed her coat and locked the office door behind her. The rain had intensified, drumming against the awning above as she stepped onto the sidewalk. Taxis splashed through puddles, and pedestrians hurried past with umbrellas tilted against the wind. London felt colder tonight, more hostile. Clara pulled her collar up and headed toward the tube station. At home in her flat in Islington, she couldn't sleep. She sat at her small kitchen table, laptop open, searching for anything the media might have missed. Edward's business dealings were extensive: real estate ventures, charity foundations, investments in technology startups. His social circle included politicians, entrepreneurs, and old money families whose names dated back centuries. Any one of them could have a motive. Clara found an article from 3 months earlier. Edward had testified in a closed hearing about financial irregularities in a construction project in Canary Wharf. The details were sealed, but the defendants included a prominent developer with ties to organized crime. The case had ended abruptly with a settlement. Clara wrote down the developer's name, Marcus Hale. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. The rain continued outside, relentless. Somewhere in this sprawling city, Edward was either hiding or being held, or worse. Clara pushed that thought away. She had to believe he was alive. She had to believe there was still time. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. "Bring the files your father kept. You'll understand when you see them." Clara's stomach tightened. Her father had passed away 6 months ago, leaving behind boxes of documents she hadn't fully sorted through. What files could possibly matter now? She moved to the spare bedroom where the boxes were stacked against the wall. Dust covered the cardboard lids. She opened the first one, finding old case notes, legal briefs, and personal correspondence. Nothing stood out immediately. The second box contained financial records and meeting notes. Clara's hands trembled as she sifted through the papers. Then she found it, a manila folder marked Ashford Trust, Confidential. Inside were notes in her father's handwriting, detailing meetings with Edward about offshore accounts, shell companies, and suspicious transactions linked to Marcus Hale's development projects. Her father had been investigating corruption, and Edward had been his key witness. Clara's chest tightened. This wasn't just about a missing aristocrat. This was about money, power, and secrets that powerful people would kill to protect. Her father's sudden heart attack 6 months ago no longer seemed coincidental. She felt the room spin slightly, the implications crashing over her like a wave. She closed the folder and held it against her chest. Tomorrow at Smithfield Market, she would learn more. Tonight, she needed to prepare. Clara pulled out her phone and texted her closest friend, Rachel, a journalist. "If anything happens to me, look into Marcus Hale and the Ashford Trust. Don't ask questions. Just trust me." The night stretched on, each minute heavier than the last. Clara lay in bed, eyes open, listening to the rain. She thought about Edward, about her father, about the web of lies that seemed to connect them all. Tomorrow would change everything. She could feel it in her bones. At 5 in the morning, Clara rose and dressed in practical clothes, jeans, boots, a waterproof jacket. She tucked the folder into her bag and checked the address for Smithfield Market. The historic meat market in Clerkenwell was less than 2 miles from her flat. She could walk there, stay alert, watch for anyone following. The streets were nearly empty as she made her way through Islington. Delivery trucks rumbled past. A few early commuters waited at bus stops, faces buried in their phones. Clara kept her head down, walking with purpose. The market loomed ahead, its Victorian ironwork and Gothic arches casting long shadows in the pre-dawn light. She entered through the main gate, the smell of raw meat and refrigeration hitting her immediately. Workers in white coats moved between stalls, hauling carcasses and shouting orders. Clara scanned the crowd, looking for anyone who seemed out of place. Then she saw him. A man in his 60s, silver hair, wearing a long coat, standing near the far end of the market. He made eye contact and nodded slightly. Clara approached cautiously, her hand gripping the strap of her bag. When she was close enough, he spoke quietly, his voice rough like gravel. "Your father was a good man. Edward trusted him. Now Edward needs you to finish what they started." The man's name was William Cartwright, and he had worked as Edward's private investigator for over 2 decades. They moved away from the market's bustle to a small cafe across the street, where the owner was just unlocking the door. William ordered 2 black coffees and led Clara to a corner table where they could speak without being overheard. William's face was weathered, his eyes sharp despite his age. He set a brown envelope on the table between them. Edward knew he was being watched. He suspected someone in his inner circle was feeding information to Hale's people. "A week before he disappeared, he gave me this and told me to find you if anything happened to him." Clara opened the envelope carefully. Inside were photographs of Edward meeting with various individuals at restaurants, offices, and private clubs. Some faces she recognized from news articles, politicians, business moguls, society figures. Others were strangers, but one photo stopped her cold. It showed her father and Edward in deep conversation at what looked like a Thames-side pub. William noticed her reaction. "That was taken 2 weeks before your father died. They were discussing how to expose Hale's money laundering operation. Edward had bank records, emails, everything they needed to build a case. But they needed to be careful. Hale has connections everywhere, police, judges, even MI5. Clara's hands shook slightly as she held the photograph. "You think my father was murdered?" William's expression darkened. "I think your father's death was convenient, and I think Edward's disappearance was meant to silence him before he could go public. But Edward was smarter than they realized. He created insurance, copies of everything, distributed to people he trusted. You're one of those people now." Clara felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders like a physical burden. "Why me? I'm just a solicitor. I handle contracts and property disputes. This is way beyond my expertise." William leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "Because you're not compromised. Edward couldn't trust his own staff, his business partners, even some of his family. But he trusted your father, and by extension, he trusted you. He left specific instructions. If he went missing, you were to receive these documents and decide what to do with them." Clara processed this information slowly. The cafe filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and baking pastries. Outside, London was waking up. Buses rumbled past, cyclists navigated the morning traffic, office workers hurried toward the tube. Everything seemed normal, but Clara's world had tilted on its axis. She pulled out the folder she'd brought from her father's files. "These notes mention the Ashford Trust. What exactly is it?" William glanced at the papers and nodded. The Ashford Trust was established by Edward's grandfather in the 1940s. It's supposed to manage the family's charitable donations and historical preservation projects. But about 5 years ago, Edward discovered that someone had been using it to launder money through offshore accounts. He spent years tracking the flow of funds, and every trail led back to Marcus Hale's construction empire. Clara studied the photographs again, trying to make sense of the connections. So Hale was using the trust to clean his money. How did he get access? William's jaw tightened. Edward's cousin, Jonathan Ashford, is the trust's administrator. He gambles, owes money to the wrong people. Hale offered to clear his debts in exchange for access to the trust's accounts. Jonathan agreed, thinking it would be a one-time thing. But once you're in with people like Hale, there's no getting out. The pieces were coming together, forming a picture of betrayal and desperation. Clara thought about Jonathan Ashford, a man she'd seen at those same galas, always with a drink in hand, always laughing too loud. She had dismissed him as harmless. Now she understood he was the weak link that had put Edward in danger. William continued, "Edward confronted Jonathan 3 months ago, gave him a choice, cooperate with the investigation or go down with Hale. Jonathan chose to cooperate, but then Edward disappeared. Now Jonathan's scared, gone into hiding. Without him, we lose a key witness." Clara absorbed this, her legal mind already working through the implications. "We need to find Jonathan, get him on record, and we need to secure the evidence Edward collected. Where is it?" William hesitated, then pulled out a small key from his pocket. Edward kept a safety deposit box at a private bank in Knightsbridge. "This is the key. The box is under a false name, Thomas Barrett. Only you, me, and Edward know about it. Inside, you'll find hard drives, documents, recordings, everything we need to bring Hale down." Clara took the key, feeling its cool metal against her palm. This tiny object represented years of investigation, the truth about her father's death, and possibly Edward's survival. She tucked it safely into her jacket pocket. "When can we access it?" William checked his watch. "The bank opens at 9, but we need to be careful. Hale's people will be watching. They know Edward had insurance. They just don't know where it is. Once we retrieve those files, we'll be targets." Clara's phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Just saw your message. What's going on? Call me." She typed back quickly. "Can't talk now. We'll explain later. Stay safe." She turned back to William. "How do we know the bank itself is secure? If Hale has connections everywhere, couldn't he have people there too?" William smiled grimly. "Edward chose this bank specifically because it's owned by an old friend from his university days. Someone who owes him several favors and has no ties to Hale's network. Will be as safe there as anywhere in this city." They finished their coffee in silence, both lost in thought. Clara watched the morning light strengthen outside, illuminating the Victorian buildings across the street. London was a city of secrets, she realized, behind every elegant facade. In every private club and historic estate, deals were made, truths were buried, and people disappeared. At 8:30, they left the cafe and hailed a taxi. William gave the driver an address in South Kensington, several blocks from their actual destination. They would walk the rest of the way, taking a circuitous route to ensure they weren't followed. Clara kept her hand in her pocket, fingers wrapped around the key. As they walked through the quiet streets of Knightsbridge, past luxury boutiques and embassy buildings, Clara felt hyper-aware of her surroundings. Every parked car could contain watchers. Every pedestrian could be a threat. She glanced at William, who moved with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to surveillance and counter-surveillance. They arrived at the bank, a discreet building with no signage, just a brass number on the door. William pressed the buzzer and spoke briefly into the intercom. The door clicked open, and they entered a marble-floored lobby where a security guard in a dark suit greeted them with a nod. William handled the paperwork while Clara waited, trying to appear calm. Her heart pounded as they were led down a corridor to the vault area. The guard verified William's identity, then looked at Clara. "And you are?" William answered smoothly. "She's Mr. Barrett's legal representative. She has authorization to access the box." He produced a letter on official-looking letterhead. The guard examined it, then nodded and led them into the vault. The safety deposit box was small, number 237. Clara inserted the key with trembling hands. It turned smoothly, and the box slid open. Inside were 3 external hard drives, a thick envelope of documents, and a sealed letter addressed to her in Edward's handwriting. Clara's breath caught. Seeing his precise script made everything real. Edward had planned for this, had known the danger he faced, had trusted her with the truth. She picked up the letter carefully, breaking the seal with her thumb. The letter was brief. "Clara, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have been realized. The information in this box represents years of work and considerable risk. Use it wisely. Trust William. Find Jonathan. He's the key to everything. And remember, the truth is more valuable than any fortune. Edward." Clara folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. She gathered the hard drives and documents, fitting them into her bag. William watched the corridor, tense and alert. They moved quickly, thanking the guard and exiting the bank within minutes. Outside, the morning was bright and cold. Clara felt exposed, vulnerable. They needed somewhere safe to review the files, somewhere off the grid. William seemed to read her mind. "I have a flat in Southwark. Small, anonymous. We can work there without being disturbed." They took the underground, changing trains twice to lose any potential followers. Clara clutched her bag close, feeling the weight of evidence that could topple an empire or get them both killed. The truth was indeed valuable, but it came with a price she was only beginning to understand. William's flat was exactly as he described, small, austere, and anonymous. The building stood on a quiet street in Southwark, wedged between a shuttered electronics shop and a kebab restaurant. The flat itself consisted of 2 rooms, a combination living area and kitchen, and a bedroom barely large enough for a single bed. But it was clean, secure, and most importantly, unknown to anyone who might be looking for them. Clara set her bag on the small table while William pulled the curtains closed and checked the windows. He had the habits of someone who had spent a lifetime looking over his shoulder. Once satisfied they were secure, he gestured to the table. "Let's see what we have." They spread the documents out first. Bank statements showing millions moving through the Ashford Trust accounts, routing through banks in the Cayman Islands, Cyprus and Singapore before ending up in legitimate-looking investment portfolios. Email printouts between Jonathan Ashford and intermediaries discussing donations and transfers in carefully coded language. And contracts for construction projects that existed only on paper, ghost developments used to justify the movement of money. Clara's legal training kicked in as she organized the documents chronologically. This is textbook money laundering. Hale inflates construction costs, invoices the trust for non-existent work, and the money comes back clean through legitimate business accounts. Jonathan signs off on everything as the trust administrator, giving it an air of legitimacy. William nodded, connecting one of the hard drives to his laptop. Edward spent 2 years documenting this. He tracked every transaction, every fake invoice, every shell company. He even has recordings. The first audio file that played was a conversation between Jonathan and a man with a thick East London accent. Jonathan sounded nervous, his words coming fast. "I told you I can't process any more transfers this quarter. The auditors are already asking questions. Edward's been reviewing everything." The other voice was cold, threatening. "You'll do what you're told, Jonathan. Or would you prefer we have a conversation with your bookie about that 40 grand you still owe? Better yet, maybe we should talk to your wife about where you've really been spending your evenings." Jonathan's response was barely audible. "Fine. Just give me the invoices. I'll make it work." Clara felt sick listening to it. Jonathan wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was a weak man being manipulated by people far more dangerous. But that didn't excuse his actions. People had died, including possibly her father, because of Jonathan's choices. They worked through the files for hours, building a complete picture of Hale's operation. The construction magnate had been laundering money for over 5 years, using the Ashford Trust as his primary vehicle. The amounts were staggering. Over £30 million had moved through the Trust's accounts, funding everything from property development to what appeared to be political contributions. One document caught Clara's attention, a ledger showing payments to various individuals, identified only by initials and code names. She recognized some of the amounts. They corresponded to known police corruption cases that had made the news. "William, look at this. I think Hale was paying off law enforcement." William studied the ledger, his expression grim. That explains why Edward couldn't go to the police directly. He didn't know who was compromised. He was trying to build an airtight case before approaching someone he could trust. Clara's phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. "Clara, where are you? The police came by the newspaper asking about you. They said you're a person of interest in Edward Ashford's disappearance. Call me now." Clara's stomach dropped. This was escalating faster than she'd anticipated. William saw her expression. "What is it?" She showed him the message. William cursed under his breath. "Hale's making his move. He's using his police contacts to frame you, make it look like you're involved in Edward's disappearance. Classic misdirection." Clara's mind raced. "We need to go public with this information before they can arrest me. Get it to journalists, prosecutors, anyone who can act on it." William shook his head. "If we release this prematurely, Hale will destroy evidence and disappear. And without Jonathan's testimony, a good lawyer could argue the documents are fabricated. We need Jonathan first." Clara stood and paced the small room. "Then we find him. Edward's letter said Jonathan is the key. Where would he go? Who would he turn to?" William thought for a moment. "Jonathan has a sister, Margaret. She lives in Brighton. They're close. If he's scared and hiding, he might have gone to her." Clara checked the time. It was nearly 3 in the afternoon. "Brighton is an hour by train. We could be there by evening." William was already packing the documents and hard drives into a secure case. "We'll need to be careful. If the police are looking for you, they'll be watching stations. We'll drive. I have a car parked a few blocks away, registered to a different name." They moved quickly, gathering everything they needed. Clara texted Rachel back. "I'm okay. Can't explain yet. Don't worry about me. We'll contact you soon." She powered off her phone to avoid being tracked. The car was an old Volvo, unremarkable and perfectly suited for staying under the radar. William drove with practiced efficiency, navigating through South London traffic and onto the motorway heading south. Clara watched the landscape change from urban sprawl to suburbs to countryside, her mind churning with worry and determination. As they approached Brighton, the sea came into view, grey and restless under overcast skies. The Victorian resort town was quieter in the off-season, its famous pier and boardwalk populated by locals rather than tourists. William navigated to a residential neighbourhood on the eastern edge of town, where rows of terraced houses climbed the hillside. Margaret Ashford's home was a narrow three-storey Victorian with peeling paint and an overgrown garden. William parked a block away, and they approached on foot. The street was quiet, curtains drawn in most windows. Clara felt the weight of being hunted, knowing that every moment counted. William knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. "Margaret, it's William Cartwright. I worked for Edward. I need to speak with you about Jonathan." After a long moment, the door opened a crack. A woman in her 50s peered out, her face lined with worry. "William, what are you doing here?" William kept his voice calm. "Margaret, I know Jonathan's in trouble. I know he's scared, but we can help him. We just need to talk to him." Margaret's eyes shifted to Clara, suspicious. "Who's she?" Clara stepped forward. "My name is Clara Morrison. My father was helping Edward investigate Marcus Hale. Please, we're not here to hurt Jonathan. We're trying to stop the people who made Edward disappear." Something in Clara's words resonated. Margaret's expression softened slightly, and she opened the door wider. "Come in quickly." The interior of the house was cluttered but warm. Margaret led them to a sitting room where Jonathan Ashford sat on a worn sofa, looking nothing like the confident socialite Clara remembered. His face was pale, unshaven, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. He flinched when he saw William. William sat across from him. "Jonathan, we're not your enemies. We want to help you, but we need your full cooperation." Jonathan's voice was hoarse. "They'll kill me if I talk. You don't understand what these people are capable of." Clara sat beside him, her voice gentle but firm. "They killed my father, Jonathan, and they made Edward disappear. If we don't stop them now, more people will die, including you. The only way out is through. Testify, tell the truth, and let the law protect you." Jonathan looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. "Your father was a good man. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it." Tears rolled down his face. Margaret moved to comfort her brother, her own eyes glistening. Clara felt a complex mix of emotions: anger at Jonathan's weakness, compassion for his fear, and desperate hope that he would do the right thing. William pulled out a digital recorder. "Jonathan, I need you to tell me everything. Every meeting with Hale's people, every transaction, every threat. We'll use this to build a case that even Hale's lawyers can't dismiss." Jonathan nodded slowly, wiping his face. Okay, I'll do it. But first, I need to tell you something about Edward. I know where he is."